On July 24, 2025, in the morning, big news came out on every TV channel and website. Hulk Hogan, whose real name was Terry Bollea, had died. He was 71 years old. Some people thought he was a hero. Other people saw him as a symbol of the crazy 1980s and sports entertainment. But everyone agreed on one thing: he was famous all over the world. Hulk Hogan was known for his incredible energy at WrestleMania. He was known for saying things like, "What you going to do, brother?" He became more than just a wrestler. He became a name that everyone in the world knew. Fans went online and posted memories about him. The WWE made a sad video showing his best moments. Famous wrestlers like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, John Cena, and Ric Flair all wrote nice things about him. But away from all the news stories and tribute videos, one small detail appeared in the early reports. This detail would soon become a huge mystery that everyone wanted to solve. It all started with something a family helper said to reporters. The helper stated, "There were things in Terry's private garage that we didn't even know were there. It was his special place where he went to be alone and keep secrets." That one sentence completely changed what people were talking about. Suddenly, fans weren't just remembering the wrestling star, they were asking, what exactly did Hulk Hogan leave behind in that garage? His house was in Clearwater, Florida. The property had a private garage that could hold many cars. Only a few of his closest friends and family members knew about it. Hogan almost never talked about the garage in interviews. It wasn't part of his public image like his red and yellow bandana or his championship belts were. But people close to the family said that soon after he died, Hogan's grown-up children and his lawyers went into the sealed garage. It was the first time in many years that anyone had been inside. What they found wasn't just a bunch of cars. It was a collection of personal, sad, and shocking items. These items told the story of a life lived at full speed and sometimes out of control. This wasn't about wrestling anymore. It was about the real man behind the spotlight. It was about what he kept hidden, even from the people who knew him best. The moment Hogan's family opened the big steel doors to his private garage, they were amazed by what was inside. Even his closest friends were shocked. There were dozens of cars, and each one was perfectly clean, shiny, and arranged like they were in a museum. The cars showed the excess and excitement of a man who lived every day like it was WrestleMania. This wasn't just a regular garage. It was like a personal church dedicated to powerful engines, shiny chrome, and memories. Right in front was his famous Dodge Challenger RT with gold trim. People said this was his favorite car to drive in his later years. The gold decorations weren't original from the factory. They were custom painted to match the famous championship belt. He used to carry that belt over his shoulder. Next to the Challenger was a rare Dodge Viper GTS. This was a car he almost never drove, but he always told his friends it was too fast for Florida. Further back in the room, there was a whole row of Harley motorcycles lined up against the walls. Each motorcycle had been customized with different designs from different WWE eras. One had his red and yellow Hulkamania colors. Another one was wrapped in flat black paint and had Hollywood Hogan carved into it. This was a reminder of his NWO wrestling bad guy character. On a car lift was a 1970 Plymouth Cuda. This was the same year and model that was used in the TV show Nash Bridges, but this one had been changed with modern parts and a powerful 426 Hemi engine. One wall had display cases filled with rare toy car replicas of his real cars. Some were one-of-a-kind custom-painted editions that were made just for him alone. But this garage wasn't just about looking cool, it had real power. His collection included a Shelby GT 500 Super Snake, a restored Buick GNX, and a Corvette ZR1 that was hidden under a grey cover. All of these cars had very low mileage on them. Some had barely been driven at all. Even though Hogan acted tough and bold in public, he didn't go on joyrides very often. These cars were his way to escape, but not from traffic jams. They helped him escape from being famous and always being watched. He kept them perfectly clean and untouched by dust. It was like he was waiting for the perfect moment to come back to them. Or maybe he just wanted peace and quiet. What surprised the family the most wasn't actually the cars themselves. It was how carefully Hogan had taken care of everything. There were logbooks, receipts, and handwritten notes about maintenance. All of these were written in Hogan's special handwriting that was easy to recognize. Each car told its own story. But that wasn't the end of what they found, because behind all the shine and speed, there were deeper truths waiting to be discovered. Between the rows of powerful cars and shiny metal, they found storage lockers, file cabinets, and old wooden treasure chests. When they opened them, they revealed a side of Hulk Hogan that no fan had ever seen before. In the glove boxes and center storage areas of the cars, they found letters written by hand. These letters were addressed to his children. Some of the letters were dated as far back as the 1990s, which was a very long time ago. Some letters were fun and light-hearted. They were full of dad jokes and memories of family road trips. Other letters were much heavier and more serious. They were filled with regret and sorry feelings. He expressed sadness about missing important time with his kids and making mistakes because of being famous. One note was very short. It simply said, "I built the world's biggest character and I lost myself in him." In a special fireproof lockbox that was hidden beneath the rear tire area of a vintage GTO car, there were pages from a journal. These were written during the peak of Hogan's wrestling fame. The journal entries painted a very different picture from the loud, larger-than-life character that fans saw in the wrestling ring. He wrote about lonely nights in hotel rooms all by himself. He felt trapped in his colorful spandex wrestling outfits and under the bright spotlights. He wondered who his real friends were once the TV cameras stopped filming. In another journal entry, he wrote, "Everyone wanted Hulk, no one wanted Terry." This showed how sad he felt about losing his real identity. All around the garage, there were photos scattered from a time that people had forgotten about. There were Polaroid pictures of family moments, press images that were never released to the public, and casual shots of wrestlers who had died long ago. Many photos didn't have any writing on them to explain what they were. But in one photo album, there was a single striking picture that stood out. It showed Hogan with his arms crossed, standing in front of his garage. He wasn't wearing his bandana or sunglasses. He wasn't posing for the camera. He was just a tired man standing with his machines. Perhaps the most surprising discovery was the cassette tapes and mini DV camcorder reels. They were labeled with black Sharpie marker that said, "Private, do not copy." What's recorded on them is still a mystery that nobody knows. Some people believe they were personal recordings that he made for himself. Other people think they might include interviews that were never released, or home confessionals. These might be videos that Hogan filmed specifically for his family to watch. The garage wasn't just about collecting cars and motorcycles, it was about collecting moments and memories. These were memories that were locked away from the public eye and kept secret. And in those quiet, dusty hiding places, Hulk Hogan had left behind the truth about himself. He was a man who spent many decades building up a myth and a character, and then tried to remember the real person underneath all of that. In the farthest back corner of the garage, past the motorcycles, the trophies, and even a wall that displayed custom wrestling belts, there sat one vehicle that was covered in two thick tarps. Unlike all the other cars in the garage, this one wasn't clean and pristine. It was unfinished and incomplete. There was raw metal showing, panels that were only partially put together, and a mismatched interior that looked more like a rough draft than a finished car. There were no VIN plates to identify it, no license plates, and no insurance papers. The only identification was a small engraved metal plaque that was welded near the firewall. It read, "To those I failed." The discovery of this car upset even the people who were closest to Hogan during his life. This was clearly a prototype custom build project. It was something he had started working on in secret without telling anyone. Under the hood was a massive twin-turbo V8 engine, but the electronics weren't connected and the dashboard wiring was hanging out and exposed. Even the frame rails had been custom-made from scratch. This showed that this wasn't just fixing up an old car. It was a one-of-a-kind tribute project that he was building, but nobody knew what it was for. Family members confirmed that Hogan had talked once about building a car with someone who's not here anymore. This meant someone who had died. Some fans think the car was connected to his younger brother who passed away in the early 1980s. Other people believe it was part of a personal promise he had made with a fellow wrestler who had died. But the true meaning is still unclear, and nobody really knows for sure. What everyone is certain about is that the project was very emotional for him. Taped to the inside of the passenger side door was a folded piece of paper. It had just 5 words written on it. The note said, "Still trying to make it right." The custom car seats were embroidered with initials sewn into them, but they didn't match any family members' initials. The floorboards of the car were lined with old wrestling show flyers from many years ago. Maybe he placed them there on purpose, as a kind of symbol for where his journey in life began. Whatever the purpose of this car was, the prototype wasn't made for showing off. It wasn't a way to brag or flex about his wealth. It was unfinished, deeply personal, and clearly haunting and sad. In the back corner of the garage, hidden beneath a military-style canvas tarp, there sat a jet-black C6 Corvette ZR1. The car was low to the ground, silent, and had a scary, ominous feeling to it. But what made this particular car different wasn't just its specifications and features. It was what had been hidden and stored in its trunk in the back. When the family finally opened the cargo hatch door, they discovered a sealed banker's box. It was labeled in Hogan's own handwriting. The box said, "Gorka Final." Inside was a treasure trove, which means a valuable collection of documents from the famous 2016 lawsuit. There were legal transcripts, which are written records of court proceedings. There was settlement correspondence, which means letters about the agreement. And there were personal notes from Hogan's high-stakes court battle. This battle was about a leaked private videotape that almost completely destroyed his career and reputation. The Corvette itself had become a symbol of that difficult chapter in his life. Multiple sources and people say it was purchased just a few days after the Gorka court verdict was announced. It was almost like a celebration, or maybe it was a statement he wanted to make. One source who was close to the family said that Hulk called it his revenge car. Unlike his flashy and colorful rides, this one was dark and mysterious. It was stripped of all decals and stickers, and it was deliberately made to look anonymous and blend in. There were no vanity plates with custom words, no photos of it posted anywhere, and no mentions of it online. It was just raw speed and a supercharged engine, like a silent weapon. This was for a man who had just publicly taken down a media empire in court. Hidden under the passenger seat was a check stub from a legal fund that doesn't exist anymore. On it was a handwritten phrase that said, "Revenge, not justice." Next to it was a folder that contained personal letters he had written to his lawyers. One letter he never actually sent said, "I didn't win, I survived." For fans who only remember the glitz, glamour, and big muscles, this part of the garage was like removing a mask. The Corvette wasn't just another car in his collection, it was a reflection of Hogan's darkest legal chapter in his entire life. Where the rest of the garage told stories about adrenaline, excitement, and fame, this corner whispered about betrayal, embarrassment, and the cost of living under a microscope where everyone watches you. In a garage that was built for horsepower and fast engines, this car that was silent, sleek, and covered in scandal might have been the loudest one of them all. As the discoveries kept coming and unfolding, with cars that had hidden stories, letters that were full of pain, and a prototype car that was tied to loss, Hogan's family struggled and had difficulty making sense of the emotional weight that the garage carried. Nick Hogan, who is his son, was the first family member to speak publicly about what they found. He gave a quiet interview and said, "He didn't just go out there to work on cars. He went out there to be alone with his thoughts. Sometimes he would sit in the Corvette with the engine turned off for many hours. No music playing, just complete silence." Even though it was shocking, none of the things found in the garage came as a complete surprise to the people who were closest to him. One longtime friend shared and said, "That was his therapy room. When the world was too loud and overwhelming, he went in there and let the machines talk to him." For his daughter Brooke, the moment that hit her the hardest emotionally wasn't seeing all the cars. It was finding a note that was addressed specifically to her. The note was taped to the back of a Harley motorcycle gas tank. It said, "I built this world to protect you. I'm sorry it didn't always work the way I wanted." Even Sherry, who was Hogan's longtime partner in his later years of life, broke her silence and spoke about him. She described how she would find him sketching and drawing car parts late at night. She said, "He was always planning a new build and a new project, but really, I think he was rebuilding himself and trying to fix who he was inside." The family made a choice to delay any decisions about what to do with the garage and all the items inside. They decided on no sales and no media tours where reporters could come look. For now, they're keeping the garage sealed and locked. It's less like a museum for the public and more like a sanctuary, which means a sacred and special place. Nick said, "It's sacred to us." That garage was the one place where he wasn't Hulk Hogan the character. He was just Dad, our father. In a world that had consumed and taken so much of Hogan's identity and personality, the garage stood apart and was different. It wasn't about fans, fame, or even wrestling and entertainment. It was about reclaiming silence and peace. It was about controlling one small space in a life that had been picked apart and examined from every angle by everyone. And for the family, stepping into that garage now wasn't just emotional and sad. It was like walking into his soul and seeing the deepest parts of who he really was. In one of the older steel tool cabinets that was tucked and hidden beneath a hydraulic lift, which was holding up a pristine and perfect Buick GNX, the family found what they now call the Box of Ghosts. It was a plain and simple cardboard container. The sides were damaged by water and it was sealed shut with electrical tape. Inside they found old VHS tapes, worn and faded Polaroid pictures, cancelled contracts that were no longer valid, and a few items that raised more questions than they could answer. The tapes were labeled with names written on them. Many of the names were recognizable to longtime wrestling fans who had watched for many years. The names included Savage, Piper, Bischoff, and even Linda, who was his ex-wife. These weren't wrestling promotional videos or televised interviews that had been on TV. They were home recordings that he had made privately. Some reportedly showed behind-the-scenes moments from Hogan's WCW years when he wrestled for that company. Others were clearly very personal and private recordings. One tape was labeled 99 Tour, Never Again, and it was marked with a red X. There was no other description or explanation written on it. The family has chosen and decided not to release what's on the tapes to the public. They're citing privacy concerns because they want to keep things private. But people on the inside say that what's recorded on those tapes is raw, emotional, and in some cases devastating and heartbreaking. Next to the tapes were torn-up endorsement deals and sponsorship contracts. These were business agreements, and some of them went back many decades into the past. One contract had a small post-it note attached to it. The note simply said, "Took the money. Regretted it forever." Another contract was signed but then unsigned, and it was for a memoir project that was cancelled. The memoir was going to be called The Weight of the Belt. Perhaps the most heartbreaking items were the photographs that they found. The photos were faded, curled at the edges, and many of them were clearly never meant for the public to see. There were group shots with wrestlers who had died a long time ago. There were backyard moments with his kids playing and having fun. One especially haunting and sad image showed Hogan in his full wrestling costume. He was sitting all alone on a folding chair backstage at an event. He was staring down at the ground with a sad expression. These weren't relics and reminders of glory and success. They were fragments and pieces of regret. They were pieces of a past that Hogan wished he could change or take back.